Coming up this weekend, a rematch 4 years in the making thanks to a fizzled out bout between David Onama and Austin Lango. Listen, Austin, we hope nothing but the best, but realistically, we have Garrett Armfield making a short notice UFC debut on 4 days notice. Listen, Matt, earlier on today, he was over on Twitter. He was saying, listen, I was feeding my parents goats in Missouri, and now all of a sudden he's in the UFC. But for Armfield, obviously the hard work, the dream, it is all paid off. And this is a guy that has a squeaky clean record inside of pro MMA as an amateur as well. 6-1 as an amateur. He's 8-2 as a pro. And if you look at it, I mean, the 2 losses, legit losses. I mean, the first one, a decision against Ronnie Lawrence, who's also in this card. So you get the Spider-Man meme, both guys looking at each other because they never expected that they'd be here. He also had a loss to Matteo Vogel, Canadian, over with CFFC. But I mean, you look at all of the stops in between, and this is where Sherdog and Tapology, there's some mistakes. I mean, listen, these aren't mistakes like with our buddy Ashkar Mazarov. These aren't mistakes like our pal out of China.
Mild oversights.
Yeah, where we had like giant additions on a record or giant subtractions. But if you do look at it, they do have him as 8-2 with 8 wins by finish. One of his wins by finish isn't actually a win by finish. If you go back and watch it, when he took on, and I'm going to get this one right, Sharky Slider. He won that fight by decision if you go back and watch it. And if you go back and watch his first, fight after his last loss against Vogel, he ends up getting a win over Alex Machias. He wins that fight quickly. It's at the end of the first round. Gets that one done by submission. But realistically, Matt, went through, watched a lot of tape on Garrett Armfield. We know and love David Onama. I mean, he's one of the top prospects in this featherweight division. And that's the interesting thing. I started this video off by saying, Matt, like, this is a rematch 4 years in the making because these two guys fought with a similar enough promotion, because at the time it was Fighting Alliance Kansas, or Kansas City Fighting Alliance. Now it's James Krause's FAC. It's the same promotion. That's where these two guys met at the start. So it's kind of awkward, but you go back and you watch that fight. I hope you went back and watched that fight. It was a 3-round title fight. There were 3-minute rounds with the promotion for the title at 145. Matt, those two guys had a pretty damn competitive fight back then a few years ago.
This is going to be a great fight. And it's kind of funny that David Onama found himself in a very similar position when he made his own UFC debut. Big underdog coming in on short notice. The difference was Mason Jones, I feel like, was a lot more established.
Up a weight class too.
Exactly. But Mason Jones was a lot more established to the average MMA fan just because he was a little bit more experienced. He had the fight in the UFC before. And for Onama, this is a big opportunity that he's kind of giving Garrett all of a sudden. Like, not a lot of fighters have the opportunity to fight one of these upper tier prospects, especially not when they're a prospect themselves. Normally fighters like this kind of get, they feed on an older fighter who has a bigger name, they make one of those really sad fights like a BJ Penn, Yair Rodriguez. It's happened a million times. It's going to happen a million more times, but this is a very, very fun matchup. This is my only problem in Garrett's whole career. His losses are to very, very good fighters, but his wins have also been to over kind of underwhelming competition, I do find. And that has been an issue for me. He has looked really good in those fights. Let's be very clear about that. But a lot of those guys skill-wise did not really look like they belonged to be in there with him. So I genuinely think that this is his hardest fight since the last time he fought David Onama.
I agree and I disagree. The only way that I do, I agree with you there. You look at the combined opponent record of the guys that he's faced in those wins as a pro, and it's 34-42 and 1 draw. And if you really dissect it, I mean, the last guy that he beat was a big-time name. I mean, it was Steven Peterson, not Steven Peterson. It was Stephen Graham. My goodness. And if you know Stephen Graham, he's the guy that was brought in by Bellator to fight James Gallagher. It's a teammate of David Onama. So it was with that promotion. It was with FAC. And you kind of look at Armfield and you really kind of break it down. I mean, this is a guy that's originally from Missouri, kind of like a Michael Chandler type because his background is wrestling, Missouri guy, but he uses his hands. And that's the best part about it. When I watch Garrett Armfield fight, this guy looks like a real deal, legitimate prospect. I mean, his hands are fast. He's very accurate when he decides to pick his shots. When he decides to get a little bit wild, that's when things come unhinged a little bit. but he can always fall back on his power. So you go back and you watch his fight against Stephen Graham, and it's like, okay, this is a guy that I've known off the regional scene. And Graham,
walked him down.
I expect great things. Walks him down, throws the jab to the body to make him think. Graham's hands come down. He goes left hook to the head, right uppercut, and knocks him down, and then bang, he's completely done. But again, you watch the fight against Sharky Slater. That was one of those ones. Referee is a guy, and I'm going to do an impression, Matt. It's me, Nick Nolte. Because Nick Nolte's the referee, but it's not the old guy, it's the youngish guy. And you watch that fight, and he's all over him. I mean, I wrote down FU boxing, power and speed, the counters, the angles. He's moving in and out. He's defending takedowns. You could tell that old Sharky decided, like, I'm going to try and take this fight to the mat. And every time it was Armfield defending the takedowns, getting out of some tricky guillotine spots. Those are kind of some spots where he did get caught. And then by the end of that fight, he's completely all over it. I had him winning all three rounds in that fight, but one of the judges gave it to Sharky 29-28, which is ridiculous. Like, you talk about rigged with Shamrock on that one. That one was rigged. But I mean, Matt, I go through all of this, even his toughest fight, and this is what I wanted to kind of hand it off to you. I watched this fight against Vogel, the Canadian. We know him, we love him. In that fight, Vogel gets a point deducted in the first round for dropping his mouth guard out of his mouth because he's Matt Mitrione a whole bunch of times in the first round. But if you watch it, I mean, nice 1-2, nice 1-2, nice 1-2, and Garrett Armfield's dropping him and nearly finishing him. No nonsense, Keith Peterson's the referee in that fight. Second round, Vogel kind of rallies back, and then all of a sudden he just gets Armfield up against the cage, kind of jumps his back, keeps it, and then he threatens rear naked chokes for minutes on end. He ends up getting it. He gets the tap, but you look at that loss. Vogel's a pretty good fighter. You look at it again, Ronnie Lawrence decision loss. That's a pretty good fighter.
Exactly.
When I look at Armfield, like, great boxing, good power, good speed, good combinations. He trains at a gym that everybody knows and loves, Matt. Kill Cliff FC. Nobody knows what that gym name is, Matt. Why did they change their name 3 times? That was Hard Knocks. Now Sanford.
I told you. What did I say?
Kill Cliff
exactly.
FC. But
put some respect on Matt's name.
When you watch the original fight between David Onama, it's at 145, and I look at a guy like Garrett Armfield. Now, some websites have him 5'7", some 5'6". If you watch his last fight, they say he's 5'10", but he had a fluffer for that. Like, we're getting real hard, and we're saying that he's 5'10". That's a fib. We know that's a fib. But when you look at the way these two guys match up physically at 145 pounds, and Onama's got length, Onama's got size, Onama definitely cuts weight and then rehydrates quite a bit. When I look at Garrett Armfield at 135 pounds, he's a big 135.
Huge.
So at 145, I don't really know how it translates. And the only other thing that I have to say about Armfield, I think he's like, and I'm not joking, like, when I watch this guy fight, I think, wow, this guy's a real deal prospect. I think he's going to translate and go place in the UFC. I don't say that every week. I don't say that about guys coming in on short notice very often either. So take everything that I say, like, I'm dead serious about this. The one thing that I've seen is when he decides to grapple a lot and when he really goes flurry heavy, if he doesn't get that knockout punch, he kind of starts to drop his hands the end of round 1, into round 2, and then it starts to kind of come apart a little bit, and we're huffing and we're puffing and we're grappling a little bit more. David Onama, not the best defensive grappler, and in their first fight, it's just striking oriented. I wouldn't be surprised if Armfield tries to go for the takedown. And this isn't just Onama against, a really good guy in Mason Jones, and he struggled with the threat of the takedown. This is David Onama. If you go all the way back through, you look at these pro fights, and I know I've talked a lot about this one, Matt, but I absolutely love the fight. The fight against Brad Robinson, like Justin Overton was the fight, that I really go back to, because Overton was a credentialed black belt practitioner in that one. Obviously, Onama gets a submission victory, but again, I think a guy in Armfield has a pretty darn good opportunity in this fight, and I like it. It's a tough ask on short notice for him.
That's why I don't think he has a great chance. Like, yes, I like his skill set, but he's a smaller guy coming in on 3 days' notice. There's a lot about that I dislike. And at 145, David Onama's as big as anybody. He's as big as Yair. He's as big as Max Holloway. Like, style or physically, he matches up well with every single fighter in this division. And I do feel like his takedown defense has improved over time. Like in the Mason Jones fight, he was offering up resistance to the much bigger man, who now, to be fair, did get him down. But still, the fact that he was able to defend some of those and scramble is at least confidence boosting going down back to 145 pounds. And I really do like his counters from the outside. I think Armfield's going to be doing a lot of chasing in this fight. And he's a fighter who's very squared because, hey, he can go for the takedown, but he can also box. It's something that works very well for his style. The only problem is there is a counter to every style. And a lot of those fighters who fight very square, they're open to the body shots, they're open to knees up the middle. And if they do start being cognizant of some of those, body and leg attacks, that's when you said those hands are going to drop. And Armfield's a guy who just naturally, as a fight progresses, he will sort of lose some of his defensive tendencies. And with David Onama, who I don't think he has to fight at a crazy volume in this fight to have success. I think he can fight almost like a Jeff Neal from 2 or 3 years ago did, where he was just fine to kind of sit back, wait his time, hit you with that big counter shot, and then when he hurt you, he could jump on and do some real damage. I could see a very similar performance from David Onama, and I might sound like I'm down on Armfield, but I do agree with you. I think this is a prospect who's going to go on to have a lot of success, but the issue is this could be one of those situations we brought up Onama, Mason Jones, where you had the guy on short notice coming in. He's the big underdog, but he might lose the fight, but it's one of those good losses on his record. It could also be one of those Benoit Saint Denis, Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos, where it's like, oh my God, this is going horribly wrong from Jump Street. Now, to be fair, and it is kind of similar, a guy moving up in weight who's very talented. Now, in hindsight, we might say, okay, Saint Denis wasn't that good, but going into that fight, I know you were very excited for him, and so
he looked
was
pretty damn good in his last fight. I got that to say when he was taking on the green mask.
I'm just saying, every time that we have one of these prospects who looks a lot better than we ever thought he would, there's also one of those situations where they come in and it's like, oh my goodness, we probably should have known better. He was smaller. He was going in on short notice. And I just feel like this might be one of those situations.
And David Onama's last time out almost finished by Mowgli Benitez. You look at the result, and it's a standing TKO win, and he had a 20-punch combination to get that finish, and Mowgli was out on his feet for sure. He's falling down before the referee ended it. But you look at it for Onama, he gets pawed at, and he just starts to grab his eye, and he really had a hard time readjusting. He had to go for the offensive takedown.
To be fair, Sadiq Youssef got dropped by Benitez. Like, he's a tough guy for anybody.
Cleared the cobwebs. But Matt, we have a look at the odds for this one. It gives me giant pause because David Onama opened a minus 500 favorite, minus 711 right now. You look at it for Armfield, plus 385 to plus 492. And you have a look at our Instagram page, Instagram story, threw it out there last night. 90% of the fans going with David Onama. Fans, I agree with you. However, I mean, we are juiced to the gills at minus 711. I think there's a damn good chance for Garrett Armfield here, even on short notice. Again, a guy who I've seen at 135 struggle a little bit with the cardio, obviously winning out in these fights. Don't get me wrong. I have so many nice things to say about Garrett Armfield. I think he's going to be a great fighter in the UFC. I made that comparison to Michael Chandler because they train together. They both train at Killcliff FC. I sound ridiculous for saying this. Hey, gyms, don't change your name, with the changing of the seasons every time. Just keep it just one thing for a little bit. But when I do look at it, Matt, I see him having a hard time getting through. And again, if you're putting it out there on Twitter that you're at your parents in Missouri, you probably weren't in Florida training. So I know I've seen him with Amanda Nunes in the last, 4 weeks, 3 weeks on his Instagram. He's getting ready, training with the champ. But again, I see a few red flags getting ready for this one. But honest to goodness, win or lose, I look at Armfield as one of those guys like Dan Argueta that came in recently, had a weird fight against Damon Jackson, an argument and a little bit of a fight against Damon Jackson. I think Garrett Armfield's going to make a lot of people sweat, and I really don't like that line for Onama.
Yeah, when you said he opened at a minus 500, Onama did, I kind of expected the line to adjust down to like a minus 375 kind of. I still expect Onama to be a sizable enough favorite, but I was surprised that it ended up going the other way, that people are so confident in him. I think it's a case of the right guy at the wrong time. I'm glad that the UFC did sign Armfield, and like you said, I do think he will go on to have quite a bit of success. I just think this is a really hard matchup to get ready for. Like, David Onama thought he was going to have a fight this weekend. He thought it was going to get canceled, but still, he put in that time in the training camp to begin with, and that's still going to pay off getting ready for a fight like this. And like you said, that's what I was going to mention. If you're feeding goats in Missouri, how are you training at formerly known as Sanford, now Killcliff MMA? Like, it's just not the right situation, I don't think, for him. Again, I'm really happy that he is now in the UFC. And this is one of those situations where like he's going to get another chance down in his natural weight class because he's doing them a favor. I just think this is a step too far.
And if you like a guy like Garrett Armfield, I mean, Austin Lingo, not too far removed, good combinations, a little bit slower. He'll grapple a little bit. Armfield, a little bit speedier, a little bit tighter. You never know. Wish I was a baller. Wish I was a little bit taller, Matt. I don't know if Skilo would be picking fights, but both of us going with Uganda's David Onama to get the win, bringing it back to Glory MMA and Fitness. We have a big time week ahead in terms of the fights, so make sure you check out the rest of them. RDA Fiziev in that main event. And listen, it is a big time card even next weekend, Matt. We have Ortega taking on Yair.
That's like
Rodriguez.
a pay-per-view main event.
Listen, you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. And as we always say,
Let's get into it.